This is 7/11 polyrhythm in 4/4. Hey, what's going on everyone? This is Nick. Today I'm going to be talking to you about 5 apps that I think will help your practicing in 2021. I just want to start off by saying that I'm not endorsed by any of these apps. I'm not sponsored or anything. I just use these apps regularly in my practice and I feel like they've helped me tremendously. If these sorts of things interest you, please consider liking and subscribing. I'm making new videos every Monday and occasionally every Thursday at 3 p.m. So let's get into it. So the first app I'm going to talk about is an app called Harmonomics. Now the Harmonomics app is an ear training app that has a really awesome way of helping you ear train. This one was shown to me by the great Shy Maestro, and he recommended me to use it whenever I'm on the train, waiting for a bus, waiting for the train, in commute, etc. I guess anything but driving, really. And this app helps tremendously. There's a bunch of different exercises on this app, but the easiest ones probably being intervals. So I'll show you a little bit of that. And basically once you do that, it'll show you what you got wrong, what you got right, etc. and how well you're doing. The best part about this app, in my opinion, is that it'll actually record your answers that you got wrong, and it'll start giving you the questions that you got wrong over and over again so you can get better at it. So it's kind of an intuitive and smart way of getting better at the things that you're weak at in terms of your ear. They've got tons of options. They got melodies, intervals, chord progressions, scales, chords, perfect and relative pitch, mixed exercises, theory, and user, which I guess is custom exercises. So the next app I'm going to talk about is called iReal Pro. It used to be called iReal B. I've had this app on my phone for I think like 8 years now or something like that. But it's basically a huge database of chords. If you're a jazz musician, you probably already have this, but if not, this is also a very useful tool. They have tons of music on it. Here I had to download all the standards, but if you go onto the forums, you can, for example, get a playlist of all the Beatles tunes, and you can download it to the app. And just like that, you have so many songs at your disposal. Now, for example, if we wanted to see the chords for No One, we have them right here. If we wanted to play along for it, for example, there's a little playback function that is essentially a backing track for these songs. You got some really funky sounds in there, but for example, there's a mixer, and you can change it from a percussive organ to a jazz organ to even a choir. And instead of picked bass, you can, for example, use Moog bass, and instead of drums, you could have a click 2 and 4, and you can actually change the levels of all these things. You can also change the tempo and style, so I'm going to try jazz even 8ths, open. You can also have any number of choruses on here and any number of tempos, so it's a really good practicing tool. The third app that I want to mention is called Metronomics. Now when we open up, it's just kind of a plain old metronome. But there's some really cool functions in here. One of my favorite functions is to add subdivision and custom subdivision. So with a custom subdivision, we can get kind of anything we want. If you've seen Adam Neely's video on the 7/11 polyrhythm and you're like, how can I do that? Well, actually, we can grab it right here in custom subdivision. So this is what 7/11 sounds like. So that's a bit confusing because our quarter note and that rhythm are the same sound, but we can actually change the sound. So let's actually put a closed hi-hat. This is 7/11 polyrhythm in 4/4. You can also save some custom metronomes. So for example, one day I was shedding Aaron Park's tune, Harvesting Dance, and that tune is 18/4. It's a bar of 4, 2 bars of 5, and a bar of 4. And I programmed the drum groove like this. What's cool about it is these little faders over here are probability faders. So when we're programming a groove, we can set the probability lower or higher, and we can actually get kind of an interactive and sort of real drum. Here's another example of Aaron Parks' tune Travelers in 15/4. There's also other cool features like, do you want the downbeat every bar? Play the bar how many times? You can even have inaudible for 1 bar, inaudible for 2 bars, audible for 1 bar, etc. One thing I forgot to mention in this video while recording is that you can actually export the drum grooves as an audio file or MIDI file, and you can import them into a DAW or do whatever you want with them. But that's also a really handy tool, especially for those of you who like beats or like to produce your own music and don't necessarily have a drummer or a drum kit. So the next app I want to talk about is the Tanpura app, and this one isn't particularly my favorite. It's just kind of one that I have. Any of them will do. But if you've used a cello drone to practice, this is a great tool. If you're, for example, a wind player, upright bass player, or a brass player, anything that really requires really good intonation, this app is good for you. Instruments like guitar and piano or drums, for example, are not really the best example because you tune them and you kind of set them. So when you're playing, you don't necessarily have to worry about your intonation like that. But this is also great for ear training and a bunch of other exercises. So one thing you can do with this is pick a key and then pick, for example, one of your favorite childhood songs, or like, for example, Mary Had a Little Lamb, or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Frosty the Snowman, Jingle Bells, and really try to learn the melody by ear in this key without really like thinking intellectually about the notes. And if you can do that, it's a really good indicator that your ears are working. It's a great way of building up your ears, especially if you're a beginner and transcribing a whole solo is kind of daunting to you. So the last app I want to talk about is called Humanome, and this was actually developed by the great Wayne Krantz. So essentially what Humanome is a metronome that is going to trip you up. So basically you set the speed, you can set the speed from 1 to 5, and then you adjust the intensity. So the intensity is how fast the speed is going to fluctuate. And then you have beats per measure. So for example, you can have it in a 4/4 grid, a 7/8 grid, a 9/8 grid, a 5/4 grid, 11/8, and 3/4. And then you have in Humanome, which is really just kind of an intense version of this. So just to show you an example really quickly, I'm going to have it on in Humanome, speed 5, intensity all the way up, and in 5/4. So as you can see, the metronome is really fluctuating a lot here. So I've heard a lot of educators and a lot of musicians talk about how, well, when my student uses a metronome, when you take off the metronome, the time goes back to normal and it just doesn't sound good. Well, to me, it's because you're relying on the metronome for the time without actually keeping the time yourself. The metronome shouldn't be your timekeeper. It should be a reminder, like, oh, here's a grid, stay on it. But if you're relying on the metronome, you're not really getting better at it. So you kind of have to push yourself and do different metronome exercises in order to really improve your time with the metronome. So what Humanome does exactly that. It's an unpredictable metronome that you won't really be able to rely on. You have to be listening to it constantly, and you have to be kind of chasing it. And I think Wayne Krantz did a really great job of it. I think he developed this really early on in the pandemic when a lot of us couldn't play with a drummer, a lot of us couldn't play with anyone. Now we can start to play with other people, but it's still a little risky and it's still not the safest situation. So this is still a great tool, and it'll be a great tool once the pandemic is over. Hit like to make the pandemic go away a little faster. So those are all the apps I have for you today. I just want to give a few shout outs to a few apps that I also really use, but they're really kind of customary, so I felt like I didn't really need to go over them. A tuner app is something that every musician should have on their phone. A great one that I like is called Guitar Tuna, which is a really intuitive way to tune your guitar. Other good ones are the Voice Note or the Camera app, because it's really great to be able to record your practice and listen back and evaluate. And some kind of notes app is great because you can track your progress with practicing and you can really kind of evaluate yourself. So thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way through, please hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications to be notified whenever I'm making a video. If you don't want to turn on notifications, I'm making videos every Monday at 3 p.m, so check them out. And sometimes Thursdays. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope this really helps your practicing routine, and happy practicing.